You know? So we would like to apologize to our online viewers for that 30-second delay. But have no fear, we are here, we are geared up, ready to go.
That's right. We have reached week 8, our final week of our study on Abraham and his faith journey. That's been an awesome pleasure to be up here and kind of dig through the scripture with you guys. It's just been an amazing journey. So we're going to kind of end today with the pinnacle, of course. We'll get to that later. But at first, I want to kind of go back through Abraham's life, see if everybody was paying attention. So we're going to do kind of a pop quiz this morning, if y'all don't mind playing along with us.
You will be graded on participation.
And we are, I just want to say, I'm kind of like the bread here. I was at the first class and then at the other, in the last class, and was helping teach the other class on the other side. But I followed these guys online, and man, what a great job you guys have done with this. And I also want to say welcome. We got people from all over the place, from Indiana, Texas, Kansas, and all the way from Mississippi as they came in today, and from all over. So we're glad you're here. So we got people from all over the world watching, and all over the country in here right now. So we're glad you're here. Thank you for being here.
Especially people from Texas, right? Because, you know, Texas is probably the greatest place on earth.
Well, you know, it's been good because we've sent several missionaries to Texas, and it seems like they're doing their job from here. So that's good. That's good.
All right, so let's get kind of kicked off. See if everybody was paying attention from week 1. Hope we got a marker. That
okay, we have marker technical difficulty.
There we go.
Going green.
Is this microphone working? Okay.
Green was always good. I had a teacher that graded in green. It just didn't make you feel like you were felt good about
Derek,
stuff.
what are you doing here?
I'm trying to get a marker that works, but no.
Okay.
Oh man.
Let me see if I can find one.
Yeah, we're struggling.
Again, things like this are unacceptable
Bear
at
with
White Ferry
me.
Road. We don't normally behave in this manner.
That's right. So we're going to look at Abraham's life here, which you can't barely see.
There we go.
All right.
Nice.
Let's see if this one works.
Third time's a charm. Nope.
Oh, boy.
Nope. One more.
Oh boy.
Please, Lord. Right here. Nope.
Nope.
Oh, well. All right, so we're looking at Abraham's life, right? So he was called, right? This man was called. But what was his name when he was called? Abram.
All right.
Okay, so we're not going to use the board.
That's
so
the level. That's the level 1 question.
Curveball. Bear with me. So it was Abram. What was special about Abram?
I like that answer.
Absolutely nothing, right? He was an ordinary man, somebody that we could relate to. There wasn't much. What was also significant about Abraham at the call of his, here we go, okay, man. Dave's running this morning.
You got David Bromley running.
Oh, that's it.
Don't want to see that very often.
We have a man named Abram, which means exalted father, probably to the deity they worshipped at the time, right? So he was 75 years old, correct? Very old man when God comes to him with this promise. A promise that doesn't make sense to us, right? A promise that, you know, through the world, you got a 75-year-old man who has an old wife, but yet he's going to be the father of many nations, right? So there's nothing really extraordinary about him. However, God sees him fit and calls him to a big purpose. But we see Abraham in a faith journey that's going to look a lot similar to ours, right? We see a man, he grew up in the Ur of the Chaldeans, right? He gets bogged down in Haran for a little bit, but then he finally makes his way to the land of Canaan, probably 5 or 6 years after his initial call. So we see a man's faith kind of jump up, right? He's walking with the Lord. We see him getting to the land of Canaan. He starts building altars to God. He starts worshiping, right? Remember, he's a city slicker, a yuppie, as they would say on the Duck Dynasty, feeling him. He was a yuppie, but he's walking out and becoming a nomad in a land unknown to him. So he gets to Canaan. He's starting to walk with the Lord, but then we see, just like in our faith journeys, we see him fail, right? What happens? What's his first failure as Abram?
This is the pop quiz part.
This is pop quiz. I'm gonna be bouncing in and out, so y'all work with me. He lied, right? First time he's faced with adversity, right? A famine. We see him flee to Egypt, flee to a society, to a culture that he's probably familiar with, and he throws his wife Sarah under the bus, right? Says he's his sister. He's trying to save his own skin. So you see a faith dip, right? He lies, and this is in Egypt with Sarai. So he's walking in it, but it dips down, of course. But then he comes out of Egypt, right? He comes out of Egypt wealthier than he went into Egypt, right? When God, we can't do for ourselves, God provides. And he struck some famine on the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh ended up giving him all kinds of cattle, servants. So he comes out and he goes, backtracks to Canaan, and we see a man's faith begin to grow, right? He's left with a decision in chapter 13. Him and his nephew Lot, we know about Lot. He's a troublemaker, kind of hanging out with him. But we see that they're set with this circumstance where they have to divide the land, right? But yet Abraham, starting to walk with God, uses the answer of faith, right? He says, Lot, you can have whatever land you want. I'll take what's left over. If you go to the east, I'll go to the west. Vice versa. You take first choice. Of course, we know Lot's decision leads to destruction, but we see a man his faith start to go back up.
Derek, this is a very impressive line graph you got here.
Like that?
I just want,
you see that?
You know, I mean, that's
good stuff.
Not most people
right?
can do that.
I know. I had to practice this.
It looks like my bank account.
We then see a man's also, we see a faith going even further up, right? Because in the next chapter, we see that Lot is taken as a slave, right? King Ked, as Ruck saw it, he has 5 armor. They're taking over the territory. Well, Abraham, with just his trained 318 men, with God on his side, knowing that God's on his side, goes and rescues Lot and defeats these 5 kings. So it goes up a little more. And we're in about chapter 15 now of our study. So Abraham's walking, he's defeating kings, he's got 308, he's got servants now, he's really maturing in his faith. Chapter 15, God comes back, reassures him of his covenant, right? But then what happens next? What's the big fail? We called it baby mama drama in our study. So what happened in chapter, I believe, 16? Hagar, right? Y'all remember the role play me and Ruck did? So that face goes down, right? But up to this point, this was the initial promise. 11 years have passed. I don't know about y'all, but like we talked about that week in that study, 11 years is a long time. We did the 10-year challenge. Me and Ruck looking nothing like we look like today, but that's a long time, right? And he's already thinking maybe Ishmael is the son of promise, so he listens to Sarai, and they have Ishmael. So we got some baby mama drama. The son of flesh. Ishmael's born. So as we keep going on, we'll see that Abraham's walking with God. We'll see that just because he rushes God's timing, that doesn't do anything to God. Because as we go on, we're going to see in chapter 17 that God actually says that his son of promise is going to be Isaac. And we're going to see actually another 13 years pass as Abraham's walking with God, where God comes back and promises him the year later that Isaac, his son, will be born. So we're looking at a big gap here, right? God's timing is different than our timing. Because before, which Ruck's going to get into a minute on the birth of Isaac, we see a 25-year gap from the initial promise to when Isaac is born, the son of promise. I don't know about y'all, but that's a long time. I just had my 35th birthday. And I couldn't imagine. That's pretty much my entire life that Abraham and Sarah has been waking up every morning with this promise on their heart, but yet it not fulfilling. But I tell you what, this 25 years has been a day in, day out test with God, right? It's been molding Abraham into the man that we're going to read about today, the man of faith, the ultimate test. And it wasn't in these points, right? I could tell you that. It wasn't in these mountaintop points that Abraham learned the most. It's just like in our life, it's in these points. The low points in the valley where God was working on Abraham's heart, right? It was working and molding him into the man of faith that he is today. And before we get into the sacrifice that we're going to talk about today, Ruck, would you give us a kind of a roundup of chapter 21 and how we got to this point?
Is that my cue?
That's your
where I'm
cue,
supposed
bro.
to go?
Let's go.
Okay.
We got to roll. We're already 5 minutes behind today.
I really appreciate the John Madden
You like
illustrations
that?
you got
Yeah,
going on over here.
a little John Madden tribute. I'm going to move this back on out
okay.
the way.
You're doing a phenomenal job, Derek.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So before we go into chapter 22, where we see the ultimate sacrifice, the culmination of all of these ups and downs, this faith journey that Abraham has been on, one that we can relate to, I think that it's important for us to touch base on chapter 21. And so if you're with me, go to Genesis chapter 21. We're going to go into the birth of Isaac. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 21, and I'm going to just kind of read through them pretty quickly. And then what I want to do is break this down in two different divisions. You got verses 1 through 7, which is the birth of Isaac. And then you got 8 through 21, which is going to be ultimately Ishmael and Hagar sent away. So, starts in verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. That's important, at the very time that God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have bore him a son in his old age. In verse 8, the child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw the son whom Hagar, the Egyptian, had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be distressed about the boy and your maidservant. Now, Abraham at this point is wealthy. He's got a lot of things. He's got cattle. He's got all kinds of resources. Probably could have gave sister girl more than a skin of water, right? But you know what? He's like, here you go. Good luck, you know. And so we think that that's a very sad event. But what we'll ultimately see is that this is what God wanted to happen. So he gives her a skin of water and sends her about her way. She wandered, he then set them on her shoulders and sent them off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered into the desert of Bathsheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down nearby about a bow shoot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. As she sat there nearby, she began to sob. God, hearing the boy crying, and an angel of the God called Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes. She saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up, and he lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran. Verses 1 through 7, we learn a very simple but important message here, that God keeps his word. Right? In the passage, the long wait comes to an end, and finally, the birth of Isaac arrives. And we're immediately struck with the emphasis of that fulfillment in verses 1 through 2. 1 and 2, rather. Isaac, the name which means laughter, is accompanied by this phrase. If you look in verse 6, God brought me laughter, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. Now, once upon a time, the only laughter that you heard in the tents of Abraham and Sarah was laughter of doubt. It was laughter of denial. And then it was Sarah herself laughing at hearing the words of the angel of the Lord saying, hey, this time next year you're going to have a son. And she laughed. Isaac's name is laughter. That's what the name Isaac actually means. But now that laughter is only joy, and those who laugh will laugh with her joyfully because of God's promise being fulfilled. And then right on the heels of all that joy and good things happening, he puts a feast together and everything else, is what seems like a very, very sad event, right? You have Sarah who says, hey, this maidservant's son is making fun of my son. He's mocking him. And so I just want him to be gone because he won't share in the inheritance. And then you look at verse 11, and this distressed Abraham, right? Now imagine being Abraham in that moment. You had went through all these ups and downs. You'd been on this faith journey. You had seen all these miracles happen. You had had all these mistakes and everything else. And now you got this son. And then your son of promise comes, which obviously is the promise of God being fulfilled. And you have to recognize that. But now your other son, right? And I have to believe that it was based on the scripture here that Abraham's distressed because he loved Ishmael too, right? I mean, it is his child. And so you're asked to send him away. And then God intervenes. And God says, nope, listen to your wife and do what she says, right? And I go back to, man, this is exactly what God wanted to happen, right? And the reason why you see that is because ultimately what God will do with the story of these two boys, right? Now, the inevitable quarrel between these kids was going to happen, right? Because you got Ishmael, who's about 13 years old at this point. You have Isaac, who's just being born. And so they get sent away, and it would seem like that's for good. Like nothing will ever happen for that situation. Like they'll just be sent away. They'll be in the desert, never heard from again or anything else. That wasn't an easy time at all. But if you look at Galatians 4, 22 through 29, it describes the spiritual application for this conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, right? So you have Isaac, which is the son of promise, right? And you have Ishmael, which is the son of the flesh, right? Now, I don't know about y'all, but I do know that we are in a constant battle between our flesh and our spiritual man, right? Mm-hmm. We are called to deny the flesh, right? Put away the flesh and hold on to the promises that God has for us. Matter of fact, a lot of times it's very difficult for us to step into the promise that God has for us as long as we are holding on to our fleshly desires. And I think that this is a clear example all the way back in Genesis 21 where God is illustrating for us how sometimes we just have to put away the things of the flesh, even whenever those things seem to mean a whole lot to us. Growing up in the life that I grew up in, my entire life was consumed by fleshly desires and ways of the world. And you know, whenever it came time for me to put that stuff away, there was a grieving process. There was a process where that was hard and it was difficult, and I found myself very distressed, a lot like Abraham was. But still, God called me to put away the sins of my flesh. He called me to put away those things and detach myself from it and to walk into the promise that He has for me. And so it's not really a sad story, because whenever you see it all unfold and you see things in history play out, you'll notice that even though the descendants of Ishmael persecuted and were in constant conflict with the descendants of Isaac, ultimately what you see come to happen is that whenever Abraham dies and is being buried, Ishmael and Isaac lay him to rest together. What an awesome God that we have. That I think this is just a small example of how God brings everything full circle. But, you know, that's a little bit further down the timeline. And so I want to stay in context today and then move on to chapter 22, where David's going to be reading for us.
When we turn the page into chapter 22, it's about 12 years roughly between 21 and 22. And it's, you know, chapter 22 of Genesis is this very uncomfortable chapter. It's, you know, we if you grew up in church and you heard the story, they didn't really deal with in the children's level what God is asking to be done. Kind of went past there and went to the end of the story, but there's a lot of uncomfortable things that are happening at the beginning of the story, and that we're going to kind of jump into here. So we're going to read and talk as we go here. So chapter 22, verse 1. Sometime later, roughly 12, 13 years later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Now, just hold your finger right there for a second. who's the tester here? God is. Who is tested? Okay. Who knows the outcome already?
God.
So who is the test for? It's for Abraham.
Right.
Yeah, this is for Abraham because God knows what he's going to do already. This test is for Abraham. Note that not all difficult things are tests from God. Yeah, there are tests from God. There are things that come along in our faith that test us, but not everything comes from God. We live in a fallen world. Some things just happen because we live in a fallen world. Sometimes there are attacks from the evil one directly. Now, how do we discern that? I don't know sometimes. We may never know. But we know this, that God is still good no matter what's going on. God is still faithful. And when we grow as Abraham is in our faith in him, no matter what happens, we will grow from that. Trials, we do know, produce growth in our life. Peter said this in 1 Peter 1, verse 6. He says, in this you greatly rejoice, this salvation you have. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you have to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. They have come so that your faith of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus is revealed. So whatever the source of this testing is, the result can be the same. It results in praise, honor, and glory, in our own growth and our own refinement there. And that's why James would tell them, after they had been scattered throughout because of persecution, consider it joy when you face these things. Now, it's a whole different perspective on this. So understand that this test is for Abraham. God knows what he's capable of and what he's going to do. And God knows what we're capable of. Because, look, one, we're made in the image of God. We've been redeemed. We have the Holy Spirit living in us. We have his holy people around us. We have... he is our high priest. We are set up by God to be sanctified and be successful as godly people in this world. He said, you are salt, you are light. You make a difference in our culture. The culture doesn't make a difference in you. And so, knowing those promises, we move forward with that. And that was all in verse 1. How about that? We got a long way to go, don't we?
So for the next hour and a half, we want y'all to just put your seatbelt on, get ready.
So, it's all good. Just hang on. We're almost there.
Bear with us.
We'll be there by lunch. Verse 2. Then God said, take your son, your only son. And if you're not real sure about this, Isaac.
Right.
Just like, okay, well, I could go find Ishmael. No. Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. The first time we see in the Bible the word burnt offerings is in Genesis 6, when Noah comes along after the flood, and it says he offers burnt offerings. And it's this term, the Hebrew term hola, which means complete. You offer him completely as a sacrifice to me. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Okay, what's wrong here, God? What do you see wrong with this picture? What is God asking him to do?
Well, he promised him, and now he's taken away that promise.
Yeah, this is the son that you're gonna you bless me with, and then I send the other one away, and now this one I've got to kill. So okay, I'm not sure how you're gonna do this, God. What else is wrong with this picture? Yeah, how are you going to reckon this? How can I be the man of many nations whenever you sent one away and you have me kill the other? All right? What's the obvious thing that's wrong here? You want me to kill my son? Look, that's unthinkable to us, for sure. In their culture, it might not have been so unthinkable, because what did other cultures do? They sacrificed their children. But what did God never ask Abraham to do? Sacrifice his children. In fact, a few hundred years later, when we get on into Exodus, he's going to say, don't do that. Don't sacrifice. Now, they understood sacrifice, as we'll see, but God never wanted children sacrificed. And so all this is going through Abraham's head. To do the unthinkable, to do what's never been done before, and to do what other people who don't follow God do. This may have been some of the things that he saw early on in the timeline when he was down in Ur, and what they were doing, and then he left. Really, God, is this what you're wanting from me? Well, let's keep reading. Verse 3. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. What did Abraham decide to do? To obey God. He didn't rationalize.
No.
He didn't try to say, yeah, God, I'll do that, and then not. Be kind of passive-aggressive lying. That was his pattern. And he didn't find a surrogate. He didn't go get one of his servant's sons and sacrifice them. These are, I'll take care of them just like I do. Didn't do that. Hebrews tells us this, that this was what was going on in Abraham's head the night before. Can you imagine the agony?
Oh, man.
By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. What tense is that verb in?
Past.
It's in past tense. So in Abraham's mind, what did he do?
Offered him up.
You're as good as dead to me.
Mm-hmm.
He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son. And that's what we had said here, that this is where the promise is coming from. Even though God had said it is through Isaac your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned. This is where he got to that night before he loaded everything up and took off. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead. Okay, if I kill him, you're going to raise the dead. You're going to raise him up. And figuratively speaking, he did receive him back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the verse says. That's where his mind was the night before. And then, we're knowing that background, knowing that commentary verse that you have there in Hebrews, you have this next verse, verse 4. On the third day. Don't you just love that? What do we know about third days?
Resurrection, baby.
Yeah. Don't make a bad decision on a long-term decision on a bad day. Give it at least 3 days, okay? Give it 3 days, and then we can come back to it. Give it 3 days. Because after 3, there's something about threes in the Bible. Just go think about that one and read through that one. Well, give it 3 days. He was as good as dead. And on the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. That's one of those moments. He said to his servant, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there." What's the next word?
We
will worship, and then
we
will come back.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knew, I'm going to kill him, but God's going to raise him from the dead. He's just going to. Verse 6, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son. The fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" So they were used to sacrifice. This was not an unusual thing. But wow, what a haunting question from your son. Where's the lamb? Mm-hmm. Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. notice Isaac's obedience in this. Okay, Dad, no problem. Verse 9. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay the son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham, here I am. Now just think about here I am there and here I am at the very beginning. He was present before God. That's a whole thing we could jump into. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Now, this idea, now I know, is the Hebrew word here has the idea that it's been observed that you fear me. And it's less the idea that, oh, now I know, I didn't know. Now you revealed to me, God, that you do fear me. I wasn't sure. It's not that. It's that it's been seen. You have shown, it's been observed that you fear God. And you know this now. You fear God because you didn't withhold your son. And God knew the reasoning. What a moment. Well, let me keep reading here. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. What a moment. What a moment here. What a moment of relief that Abraham felt. Needless to say, what Isaac felt. The moment of relief, like, good night, Dad, you have lost. You know, today we would lock people up for this, rightfully so. But here at this moment, it's a moment that, can you imagine how quickly Abraham sacrificed that lamb, and how glad he was to do it. This sacrifice, Isaac understood rescue, Abraham understood rescue like they had never before, and probably never sacrificed the same again, and understood what true rescue is. It's probably the most excited he's ever been to do this. Look here in verse 14. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. Right. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Notice in chapter 22, verse 8, what's the answer Abraham gave to Isaac? The Lord will provide. Right. And he did. The Lord really did. He really did provide. He really did this. And for that idea on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided later. And Derek pointed this out to us. We did a little research on this. Yeah. That later on, this is the exact spot that the temple would be built, where sacrifice after sacrifice happened. And it was in that same area. That area there had these peaks and these ridges that you would go to. And all in that area, you had the temple across to another, through a valley, and on another one is the Mount of Olives where Jesus prayed. And then on another ridge was where his sacrifice was made. So this region was holy. And a lot of sacrifice happened there. And then on 15 through 18, he says this. He reiterates the promise. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky. Remember, he told him that before. And the sands of the seashore. He had told him that before too. Remember those things he kept telling them. Just these, if you can count it, that's how many you're going to have. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on the earth will be blessed because of you, because you obeyed me. And that, you can go back all the way to Genesis 12, and that's those promises that were there. And so you see this coming together of Abraham's life. 3 weeks ago, we every Tuesday morning our staff get together and have a staff devotional, and Mike Kellett led it that day. And he said something along these lines. He actually came into Genesis 22, he said something, I'm probably going to misquote you here, Mike, but it's what I heard. And I'll just forget that you did it, and I'll take credit for it eventually. Not only was Isaac rescued from the altar of sacrifice, but that day he was also removed from the altar of Abraham's heart. Mm-hmm. You see, it's those things that your son, your only son, the son you love, was maybe that thing that was in the way of that next step of faith. It's not just sin that gets in the way of our growing. Sometimes it's good things. I told Karen the other day, I think I've become a workaholic. And I think it was always there. Maybe just high on responsibility is one of my strengths. But I'm always thinking about, things, and always, I watch TV at night sometimes because things don't turn off real easy between my ears. And sometimes things like that, even good things. Good night. I'm in ministry. We do good work here. We do good things, and it's a great place to be. But boy, even sometimes those good things of helping and can get in the way of my own spiritual growth. So we've got to take that time and continually keep Christ on the altar, because I know me. I can work for the praise of men. Mm-hmm. And my value, if today wasn't good, there was a point in time where if I didn't feel like I did good here today, and the lesson crawled right there and fell back on my feet, then my worth would go down. But at the end of the day, even if this lesson does crawl and fall at my feet, it's not about me. My worth has not changed. I'm still a child of God, still valued by God. And the power's not in me anyway. The power's in the Word of God.
Right.
And it's been a journey learning that myself. And so sometimes even good things can get in the way. The goal is to let God rule in these good things, and these good things will grow. To eliminate and cut away the impurities, and still letting Him be the Lord of our good and our great, so that He can be glorified in that. And what we see happening with Isaac is that God was glorified in all of that. Yeah. I'm going to share a quick video. Paul Stevens, though most of you in here know Paul and heard his story, there's a segment of his story where he had a very similar Abraham and Isaac moment. And that's enough setup, I think. I think you'll see how that's very similar. Let's roll that.
In 1997, we found out that my youngest son, Jake, had diabetes. We just about lost him because we didn't know what was wrong with him. But during that time that we were taking him back and forth to the hospital, I was wondering what God was doing. And we loved the Lord. We thought we was doing what was right. We was doing, Jake loved the Lord with all his heart, and so did I. But then when that happened, I was shaking. My faith was shaking. And I didn't know if I was going to serve the Lord or not. And then it came to me that, was I going to believe in God or wouldn't I? Was I going to serve God or was I? I didn't. So that night, I decided that I was going to love the Lord, that I was going to serve Him and Him only. So I went into Jake's bedroom, and I got down beside his bed, and I completely gave him to the Lord. I told the Lord that it was his life or his death, whatever He decided to do with him, it was up to Him, and I just prayed that it would bring glory to Him. I went into my oldest son, Zach's bedroom, and I said the same prayer over him. And then I went to our bedroom, and I gave my wife, Kim, to the Lord. And then I walked out into the hall, and I gave myself completely to the Lord. It was, my life hadn't been the same since.
Most of us have probably heard Paul's story at some level and the full picture of it, but seeing and hearing that, until I studied this in this way, I'd never really put it all together. Yeah. And Paul, not long after that, comes to work here as one of our elders now, and has touched lives in some powerful, powerful ways. What is it that needs to be removed from the altar of our hearts? What is still there that prevents God from letting us grow into being spiritual champions that He's called us and made us to be? We land Abraham's life today. Really, after this, there's not much more said about Abraham. He gets, his wife dies.
Right.
He remarries, has a few more kids, and I can't imagine. I'm 53, and I can't imagine having another kid. Can you imagine over 100?
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll just let that one stay right there. But think about that one. Think about that one, Lauren and Lee. But it's then he dies. There's only a few chapters left, and not a whole lot of detail. So, as we land his life, there's a lot to be learned of a 38-plus year journey of what's going on here with Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it's been an awesome opportunity to be able to just go over and study through the life of Abraham, because, we talk about his faith journey, but we're all on a faith journey as well. Mm-hmm. And just like Abraham, our faith journey is going to consist of highs and lows. There's going to be things that we did well. There's going to be things that we failed at and everything else. But to Derek's point, it's in the time of failure, not in the time of success, that we'll probably learn our greatest lessons. Mm-hmm. It's called growing pains for a reason. Mm-hmm. And that's because sometimes the greatest growth we'll experience will be on the other side of pain. And I think that what we see right here in chapter 22, the culmination of everything to come right here with Abraham and Isaac, is a prophetic picture of what will happen with Jesus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, Derek, if you want to kind of touch base on...
Yeah, just real quick too, man. It's the overall picture. Isaac was a miracle baby. Jesus was a miracle baby, born to a virgin, right? Isaac was promised years before he was born. Jesus was promised years before he was born. Isaac was named before he was born. Jesus was named before he was born. If you look at the text, you say, take your son, your only son. But he had two sons, right? But Hebrews calls Isaac his begotten son. Isaac is the son of promise, right? He said, days later, we see a sense of a resurrection when he doesn't have to go through it. And of course, verse 6 too, he places the wood on Isaac, right? Isaac would carry the wood up to the place where he would be sacrificed. And like Isaac, Jesus faced a sacrificial death by the hands of his father. And like Isaac, Jesus would carry the wood up to the place where he was sacrificed. But as we know, that's where it ended. God did sacrifice his son, Jesus Christ, which is the reason we're all in here now.
That's right.
That's the reason why we have come to the throne of grace and are given chance after chance, just like Abraham. It's just a beautiful picture, and it was just a pleasure just to see that I can relate to the father of faith, Abraham. I don't have to be perfect. My heart just has to line up and be molded with who God calls me to be.
So we encourage you, go ahead.
Oh, what? No, go ahead.
We encourage you to, well, you go ahead, because I was going to wrap. I got one. I'm looking ahead now. So
well, that's where I was going. See, great
ahead.
minds think alike. I was going to tell them about, keep coming to Bible class, because we got Tommy Perkins.
Oh, excellent. So we encourage you to read back through and spend a lot of time with Abraham, and because you'll see, as we do, a lot of corollaries in your faith there. And starting next week, we do have
Tommy Perkins.
And?
Don't know.
Mr. Loveland. Billy
Probably
Loveland.
the greatest Bible story teacher ever.
Billy Loveland.
Who knows random facts about things that no one in the world else knows, but Billy Loveland.
Yeah.
If you grew up here, Mr. Billy from Bible Hour, and they're going to be teaching on Joshua, and the subtitle of this class is Walking with God No Matter What. And it's going to be a great segue into the next level of what this is. So I will also say on the other side, If you come from a blended, we'll be live streaming this, and so we will be archiving it as well. If you come from a blended family or have a blended family where there's mine and yours and ours together type situation in your family. On the other side, we're having a class called Beautifully Blended. It's a family class, and Colin and Christy Dunn and Clay and Rhonda McConnell will be leading that class starting next week. And we've done it before. It's been about 3 years, actually, since we've done that class. Wonderful class. I would encourage you to look into that as well. Thank you so much for coming to Bible class.
Absolutely.
Thank you for getting up a
awesome.
little bit early on Sunday mornings and being here and for participating. We love you. We're going to pray and we'll close out. Thank you, Father, for everyone here that's in this room every week, those who have traveled here to be in this room, and those who join us faithfully online every week and then throughout the week. Thank you for your word that just comes alive. Even though we see the stories, we know the stories, we read them many times, multiple times in our life, but wow, how it just hits us in different ways. Thank you for the power of that.